Welcome to Hive Mind. This is Edge and Speaker doing a quick video on the race to the moon today. How's your day, Speaker?
Yeah, good. When we say quick videos, generally doesn't turn out that way, but we'll see. And we want to apologize because we got suspended for, I think it was a week and a bit, so we haven't been able to post a video. We did post something on BitChute though, so go over there and check that out. Um, but yeah, that's unfortunate because every time they do that, I can't communicate with you guys, which really sucks because I don't really have many social medias anymore, apart from these video platforms. So I do apologize to that. Every now and then, if you see us like go dead for a week, we've been suspended. On
YouTube sucks.
Anyway. YouTube sucks.
Yeah. We're still on here just because we hope to pick up some new listeners who are still using YouTube. But we know that it's important to branch out to other platforms, and we have, and we will continue to do that. We're looking at adding some new ones as well, but we're currently on BitChute and Foxhole and Pilled as well. So anything that gets suspended here on YouTube, we are still up on all of these other platforms, and we just keep on moving forward. So,
That's it.
but yeah, but I'm doing good. My head is just wrapped up in so much that's going on here on Earth.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, but the truth is there's a lot going on beyond Earth and other areas in exploration, scientific research, and even warfare. And that frontier is really rapidly developing. So it's important that we talk about it, and that's why we're diving into it today.
And I think there's various reasons why we're seeing this happen now. I think a Biden administration has really bolstered quotation marks, the US's enemies to make moves like this when they know a weak government will do nothing to stand in their way.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, anything space related, I just love talking about it and researching it, don't you?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and it's just one of my favorite types of topics to talk about. There's so many different avenues you can go down, so much that we still have left to learn. And of course, there's always some really intriguing conspiracy theories out there that I like to, I like to fall down those rabbit holes sometimes.
Yeah. So, like, before we start this, we're just talking about the general optics of what we're seeing on the surface from these countries and these news that are coming out. Now, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, that can be a whole nother podcast we can do later. A lot of people think there's already moon bases, Mars bases, and those things, in my opinion, are totally viable. I'm not against that at all. But today we're just going to zone in on this news and what this means as on an optic level anyway. But please comment down below if you think. I think we're going to get most comments going, yeah, of course there's moon bases.
Yeah,
and I
definitely.
do not disagree with you.
Have at it.
Have
Have at it on the conspiracy theories. Go for it. We're all for it. But today we're just going to be focusing on this current race to the moon and creating moon bases. Right now, there's a race to the moon. It's shaping up between the US and our allies versus Russia and China. And it looks to me, after researching this, that there's really three main objectives here. And the first one, Speaker, and you and I have talked about this kind of quite a lot, is just in general space dominance. And space dominance is the ultimate high ground over Earth from a strategic warfare perspective. And I think the moon bases are an extension of that to some degree. But also, there's some other key factors here that we do need to touch on. The race to the moon is also about mining and harnessing its resources. And yes, there are resources on the moon. Because when I brought that up to you, Speaker, you were like, what?
Yeah,
There's
I was
nothing.
like, what? No ways.
Yes, there are resources on the moon, and it's important to
And then
harness those.
and then she sent me this article. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. And then also, really, it's about establishing a moon base to perfect the skills necessary in order to ultimately establish a base on Mars, which is what their goal is. But when you look at kind of everything as a whole, it really gives you this perspective that this is the stage that we're currently at. Ultimately, global dominance just isn't enough anymore, and we're moving into an era of multi-planetary dominance. So,
I think it also has something to do with Earth dominance. I mean, if having control of the moon, uh, I believe, will give you huge dominance over Earth itself.
definitely. And I think that Trump saw that, and I think that was the purpose initially for Space Force. And, you know, he declared space as the world's newest war-fighting domain. And he said there were grave threats in this domain that made American superiority in space vital, because superiority in space does directly affect superiority on Earth. And he referred to space as the ultimate high ground, and stated that Space Force was going to help the United States deter aggression and control over that whole ultimate high ground. And when you think about it, space-based technology, like satellites, of course, they operate every aspect of activity on Earth, from civilian to military, like all communications, GPS, intelligence gathering, disaster response, weather forecasting, data transmission. I mean, if these things are disrupted, these satellites, if they're disrupted, it could bring all of these operations to a screeching halt. And so dominance in space is vital to protecting the US, our allies, from counter space programs that, say, China has been aggressively pursuing over the years.
Mm. Uh, uh,
In this,
China and Russia have had are probably the two biggest competitors to NASA, their space programs. So this is why it's concerning, because both of them together, is one of them you can kind of shrug it off, but two of them collaborating on space technology is concerning from a Western point of view. I mean, it's not like that I trust the US government either, but I rather the West take control than Russia and China.
yeah, lesser of evils there. So the race to build bases on the moon certainly appears to be an extension of that pursuit to dominate the ultimate high ground in this newest war-fighting domain. And in 2019, the Trump administration announced a moon landing goal by 2024, with the establishment of a lunar base by 2028. And this is known as the Artemis program. So the Artemis program has several countries, several governments participating in this program. They signed the Artemis Accords in October of 2020. And the countries that are included in the Artemis program and the Artemis Accords are the US, Australia, Canada, Japan, Luxembourg, Italy, the UAE, Ukraine, and Brazil.
Okay, so all countries with absolutely no space organizations.
Right, right. Well, these are some countries that are definitely looking to branch out into that arena.
Mm. But
And
but but no established organizations. Uh,
yes, so these accords are an agreement to peacefully cooperate and allow for the private sector to engage in commercial activities like mining, for example, which we're going to get into. But what's most notable about these accords, and you just touched on that, Speaker, is that Russia did not sign on to them, and instead has chosen to sign on with China and their counter space program. Russia rejected the Artemis program, saying that since the US has the most commercial space companies, it would make the US obviously the dominant leader. And it appears that Russia is vying to be that dominant leader along with China. So Russia's clearly flexing here by joining with China in this race to build bases on the moon. And it's not just about gaining the high ground, it's also about mining materials on the moon and ultimately about getting to and colonizing on Mars. So, mining the moon is definitely a key factor for establishing a moon base. And because they need to be able to tap the resources that the moon has in order to have a permanent presence there on the moon. Think about it. You can't haul tons of water on rocket ships. So what they're trying to do is harness the ice on the south pole of the moon to create water for, say, drinking, of course, but also for growing plants. They can separate it into hydrogen and oxygen and use that oxygen to be able to breathe. They can recombine it and actually even make rocket fuel. So, harvesting that ice on the south pole of the moon is key to being able to establish a long term presence on the moon. And so I think this whole race to the moon isn't just about uh, dominance in establishing a moon base. It's actually about dominance in the mining the materials on the moon to be able to then branch out into other areas like going to Mars. Does that make sense? Yeah,
There's
so
actually an interesting article. I'm just reading it here on how much, and this is what we really should be concerned about is the Democrats really are not caring about this. Their stinginess regarding Artemis funding
yes, and
seems to be coming to the forefront.
yeah, there was some concern because anytime that there's a space program that's launched in one administration, a lot of times they'll die off in the next administration. And it was kind of surprising that Biden has kept Artemis going for now. But then again, you have to look at funding, and that, comes from Congress. So it's really with a Democratic-led Congress. It's like, are they going to cut off funding for Artemis and then allow China and Russia to have the upper hand here in this race? So that's something to keep in mind. Will Artemis continue to be funded and meet that goal of 2024? Because it looks like China and Russia have the same goal, if not a little bit sooner. They're saying 2023 to 2024. So
And
they're
there's,
obviously trying to
there's
get there sooner.
of course, I mean, if they can take strategic positions on the moon, like say where most of that water is, they have the moon.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of the purpose of the Artemis Accords. It was to try to be able to establish some sort of boundaries among these countries who are trying to mine the moon for resources, to where, say, there's not some encroachment by, say, China or Russia or other countries. Like if you set up a base, then that base is like a free zone and it's not encroached upon by another uh, company or country trying to do the same thing. And we know how China handles their business here on Earth, with all kinds of stealing of trade secrets, espionage, and hacking, and cyber warfare, and that would continue. And supposedly, or just presumably, on the moon as well. And so the purpose, I think, of this Artemis Accords was to try to get enough countries on board with having some sort of ground rules for these bases that we're setting up on the moon and mining from. But of course, I don't think China or Russia are interested in playing by these rules.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, they China and Russia can smell the weakness of the U.S. government at the moment, and that has never been more clear. One, with this cooperation with this moon expansion, and the very not really idle threats from China to invade Taiwan. We're seeing this on whole different aspects of what they know they can get away with now,
Right. Exactly.
and we're seeing that
And
play out very fast.
it is. And these minerals that are on the moon, there's supposedly rare minerals on the moon, potentially worth trillions of dollars. So um, having sort of a monopoly on those minerals and or water on the moon would definitely give whoever had that the advantage on establishing long-term presence on the moon and also presence on Mars, because everyone who's involved in this moon base race realizes that it's a strategic position not only for the high ground over Earth, but also a launching point to Mars. The successful establishment of a moon base and using the resources that the moon has to offer is necessary practice for implementing the same kind of base on Mars. Because think about it, once you get to Mars, it's not like you're coming back to Earth anytime soon. You have to have perfected the ability to harness Mars's natural resources. So, what we learned from converting that moon ice into water and into other, breaking it down into hydrogen and oxygen and using that for fuel and also for oxygen to breathe, that's all necessary. We have to perfect that ability in order to be able to replicate that on Mars.
This is interesting. So, Russia's space agency, Roscosmos, quickly condemned Trump's move, likening it to colonialism. Now, that tells you all you need to know, because obviously Democrats weren't going to stick up for Trump when he was saying that. So obviously, Russia was afraid when he was pushing these programs because they knew what he was doing was taking the first step on the chessboard.
Yeah, and the truth is this is the newest form of colonialism, is it not? I mean,
It is.
we're right, but it's not just the US, it's really China and Russia are interested in doing the same thing. They're just pointing the finger at us and saying, look what
Of
they're doing,
course,
but they're doing the same thing.
they're doing exactly the same thing,
Yeah. And the truth
right?
is, it's like it's going to get done. So it's just a matter of who's going to do it first, who's going to dominate,
Mm.
and which would you rather?
See,
You know,
the best outcome would have been here would have been the US to work with China and Russia, or predominantly Russia over China, right? But the Democrats in the US have spent the better part of 10 years condemning Russia. They're not going to join up with them now, right? I think that would have been the more strategic, more beneficial outcome than a Russia-China alliance. A US-Russia alliance would have been much better.
yeah, strategically, it would have been better for us to have Russia on board with the Artemis program. But yeah, it definitely didn't work in our favor that for the
Well, of course
past
not. When you're
four
going
or
to
five
point,
years,
yeah,
we've
when
been
you
condemning Russia.
exactly, when you call them the when they bring out the Great Scare tactic, they didn't have any sort of coherent uh, form of diplomacy in hand when it comes to things like this, which they should have. But of course, uh, they don't think in big terms and in big moves. I mean, this Biden administration that you're seeing at the moment is they can't even get their border in order, more or less space.
Right, right. Well, it's all political strategy. Condemning Russia for the past 5 years has been all about the political strategy for the Democrats here in the U.S. And it's never been about, I think, having any kind of global partnership. And definitely, when it comes to space, Russia has been. I mean, look, I'm under no illusions of what Putin is and what uh, that kind of what Russia's government is like. But when it comes to space, we've worked well with Russia in the past,
Hmm.
and so that seems to be breaking down somewhat, does it not? Now that you see Russia taking sides with China.
Yeah, well, it, you got to remember the Russians were the first one to put a cosmonaut in space. Uh, Yuri Gagarin was the first one to go into space, and that 1961, I think that was, and that kicked off the space race that we saw during the 60s and 70s. Now we've got something very similar going on our hands here. So to not take this Russia-China alliance as a threat would be a very stupid move because they definitely have the technology to do so.
Yeah, definitely Russia's partnership with China pulls some weight when it comes to their experience with space. So that's something to look out for. And the Biden administration just seems like they're taking a back seat to our competitors and our adversaries at every turn. So space, the new frontier on warfare and everything else is no exception to that, it seems.
Yeah, no, definitely. China has been a little bit less successful when it comes to space activities, but we do know China has been very successful in stealing technology from the US. Now, that on a factor with Russia's capabilities makes a very deadly alliance.
Agreed. Agreed. I
Yeah,
just
so,
love watching this stuff, though.
huh?
I just love watching this stuff, though.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. It's very cool, but unfortunately, the US is not taking it seriously. I
Well, we
mean,
were under the Trump administration.
we were under the Trump administration, which is, I think, was a very important step. And people are, you know, so concerned about what's happening here. They don't understand that. We're in the future now. We're not in the 90s or the 80s where these things are happening. These things where technology is moving at a very very fast pace, and especially another thing that I'm afraid of is you've got private companies that are somewhat on par with NASA with their capabilities. SpaceX would be the one that I'd bring up straight away, and you have the Biden administration at the moment uh, not really on friendly terms with Musk. They've been trying to hack their tax rates. They've been trying to push up certain legislations in California to stop them from that. And that's why he said he was going to move his factories out of there. Now, the last thing you want is a private sector, and Musk is also in the middle of designing new missiles that are returnable missiles. So if you were to have some sort of mining capability on these missiles, so you'd fire them, they'll land on an asteroid, they'd mine that asteroid, and then they'll bring the material back. If you had a company like that teaming up with Russia and China that is going to treat them more fairly, it's a problem too.
Yeah, I think that the private sector was actually the advantage for the US. And if you suppress that, then that would give Russia and China, whose their economic structure is not based off of the private sector as much as ours is, obviously. And so that would give them the advantage. I mean, we were just trying to harness the capabilities of the private sector by, lifting those kinds of restrictions and taxes and, just giving them more freedom to be able to operate in the realm of space and use them to help us win this space race, and that was seen as an advantage from the Trump administration. That was what his executive order was all about, was being able to unleash the private sector to be able to help us, for example, mine the moon. um, but if you're going to be putting all kinds of restrictions on these kinds of companies, suppressing their ability to be able to do that, then that would obviously give China and Russia the advantage, which Biden seems to always be giving them the advantage, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, Successful empires have always used private entities or private networks to do certain works for them, like either through funding or, I mean, the best case is look at Spain's help of Christopher Columbus. I mean, they funded his expeditions. He did pretty well out of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been happening throughout history pretty commonly. Now, when you have a government that's suppressing that technology and is suppressing uh, private sectors and private people from doing these sort of things, you push them towards a competition and you push them towards other people, not necessarily nations, but in this case, probably so, that are more open minded to what they want to do and what they want to achieve, and will most likely help them do that if it's beneficial to all parties. And they're not chastising them every left, right, and center, or trying to bleed them dry.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, 2024 is just right around the corner. So that's the scheduled date for this moon landing for Artemis, and similarly with Russia and China's counter space program as well. And then with the goal of establishing a moon base permanently um, at by 2028. And then with the intention of around 2033 um, making a pass around Mars. So
And I
all of this is in terms of space exploration, all of this is pretty quick, right around the corner.
very quick. It's been wondering what they've been doing for 20 years. Um, see, I think a lot of people, us not included, because we pay attention to this sort of stuff, don't think China and Russia have capabilities to do these sort of things. One, because they don't put up videos like this, like you just saw before. These videos are a form of look at what we can do. Yeah, they're nice to look at and they show the populace what they do at. Russia and China are very secretive. So don't think they don't have the same facilities doing the same things. They're
With
just not
all of our stolen tech.
with all of the stolen tech that China has grabbed. Uh,
Yeah.
don't think they're doing the same thing. They just don't publicize it. They don't propagandize this stuff. And like this is cool for us to see. I mean, it's a Western thing, isn't it? Right? Look at what we can do. Look at all the cool tech we have. Look at all the intelligent minds we have working on this. I mean, just go down the NASA YouTube channel. And, these things are all nice to look at and they're great. But when it comes to serious business, don't don't be fooled that other countries are not doing exactly the same. They just don't have
Yeah,
a
something to
YouTube
think
channel.
about. Yeah, something to think about. Anyways, I do enjoy this conversation talking about future things like this, like the moon bases and exploration. But there's definitely some serious consequences if our adversaries have space dominance, and that's something to like we don't have enough troubles here on Earth, but it's definitely the
Uh,
next frontier. But and we need to consider that.
mm. So please comment down below. Let us know what you think. Um, we're very interested to hear your thoughts. We do love reading all your comments and hearing how you guys think about this because, we've never claimed to be authorities on that, and everyone's opinion is completely valid when it comes to things like this because they are very speculatory. So, yeah,
Yeah, interested to hear your comments. Check the description. We'll leave a link for our website where you can catch all of our platforms that we are on. We're on BitChute, we are on Foxhole, and we're on pilled.net. And obviously, we're on YouTube as well. Sometimes when YouTube decides to not suspend us. All right. And we will see you back next time right here on Hive Mind.
they're having it.